In this video, we're going to use Taiao to build these fully procedural mushrooms. Each mushroom can then be further customized to create different shapes and types of mushrooms. We're going to use Redshift to build some basic materials for rendering. Okay, so here we are inside of Cinema 4D, and you can see on the left here I have some reference, and this is a Anemita muscaria mushroom, and they're often found in sort of woody areas in Britain and other countries, and this is what we're going to have a look at modeling using Taiao. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is go to the INSYDIUM menu, Taiao, and we're going to add a toPlant. We need a trunk, and the trunk is going to be the stalk. So let's add a trunk, and what we need to do first is a couple of things. We need it to be a lot smaller because this is set to 300 centimeters, and these things naturally, let's call it 10 centimeters. So what we'll do is we'll put this height down to 10, and you can see this got this little stubby thing down here. Now we need more geometry, and there's a couple of ways we're going to do that. First thing we're going to do is go to the global settings, and we're going to drop the segment resolution, which is the resolution of the segments up the main spline that generates this geometry. We're going to drop this down to 0.1. You can see it's got a lot of geometry here, which is good. We need that for the detail. And we'll go back to our plant layers, and on the trunk main settings, we've got a ring segment, and that is the segments around the ring. So let's increase this until we get a nice sort of even polygon distribution. We want these to be fairly cubic. We might actually drop the global settings a bit higher. So let's go 0.2, something like that. That looks good. Okay, back to the plant layers. Our radius, let's set that to 5. And now we can start working on the actual shape. And all we need to do is just adjust this profile spline. So we're going to bring the bottom down, and we're going to create a nice curve that goes up, something like that. And then with this end, we're going to bring this curve down. And we're going to bring the end knot as well. So adjust this. And let's get rid of these lines because they're making it a bit hard to see what's going on. So NA. Okay. So we've got this kind of funnely thing going on here, which is about what we need. And again, this is procedural. You can adjust this at any time. If you're not happy with the shape, come back and adjust it to what you need. But something like that looks good. If we look at our reference, it's kind of a bulbousy little base that goes into the ground. Okay, so let's add a little bit of detail. We want these kind of ridges that you can see in the reference as well. And we're going to do that with a modifier. So we're going to go to the modifiers tab, and we're going to drop in a displacer, which is like the Maxon displace deformer. It adds deformation to the mesh. So we'll go in here, and we're going to drop a noise in, and you can see it creates this noise. So we'll go into the shader here, and what we're going to do is we're going to give it a lot of height. So we're going to stretch it up, and then we're going to bring the scale down so that there's all these really nice little lines. Now it looks a bit extreme at the moment, but we can adjust that going back up with the strength. So just bring the strength down, something like that. That's looking nice. So you get this really nice little detail. Let's just set it around to 8, sorry. And if you get these edges like this, which is a bit too crisp, you can fix that by going to the global settings and just enable subdivisions. That's going to smooth everything out, make it look really nice. Okay, that's looking good. You can go on and you can add more and more detail with these modifiers, and it might actually just drop in a turbulence. Now it's going to go a bit extreme because the turbulence is based on the height of a standard tree, which is that 300 centimeters. So don't worry, we'll fix it. So it's going to go, whoop, and it takes off. Let's just drop it way down to something like 1%. So you can see that it just gives it a little bit of extra noise in there, and we'll just increase the scale. Make sure that bias is off the bottom, something like that, just to give it a little bit more life, so it's not so straight up and down. Okay, cool. So that is what we're going to do for the stem, and we can call that stalk, I should say. Like that. Okay, then the next thing we want to do is we want to add the annulus, which is these kind of feathery bits that come out here. You can see on the reference, they're all, not all of them have it, but most of them have these little bits here that's called the annulus, and this is where we're going to use some different techniques than you'd probably expect. So what we'll do is we'll go into Taiao and we're going to add a flower. Let's turn off plant for now so we can look at the flower that we're going to work on. And the part we want is just the petals. So in all of these layers, let's just delete everything apart from the petal. Okay, and then with the petal selected, we're going to change the type to cone. Okay, let's get our wireframe back on because we want detail. Now this is designed for things like tulips and flowers that have this kind of cone style petal, but it can be manipulated to be all sorts of things, and in this case we're going to use it for the annulus. But while we're here, let's talk about how we can use it to do things like cap mushrooms. So if we rotate this, I've got a flaw in there that's hidden, but we'll bring it up, and then we can adjust the profile. So let's pull this down like that, and there you can see already we've got what you'd use for a cap on a mushroom, and that's where you get the power of this. It can be manipulated to do all sorts of things. So what we'll do is we'll put that back to 0 and put it back down to the ground. Okay, so let's build our annulus shape. Now we don't need that to be a full cap because we're not making a cap mushroom here. Something like that is fine. And obviously we want a ton of detail, and we've got ring and length segments here. So let's increase those. We'll hold control and select both of them, and then we'll adjust them together to get lots of detail, something like that. That was good. Okay, now we want some thickness. So we're going to, I've pulled out the furling for the depth, but we might not need to adjust that. But let's just add some thickness here, which you can see creates some depth into the model, so it's not a thin sheet. Let's just stick with 2, and we'll put a single subdivision on as well. Okay, let's turn off our wireframe. Alright, now we can go into our modifiers now. So go to the modifiers, and we'll add a curl, and the curl lets you adjust the top, so you can bring it in and out to create all sorts of shapes, but we want it coming out like that. That's good. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get another displacer. We'll drop in a noise, and we'll adjust the depth of that, and bring it around and see it really gnarlies it up, which looks good. A little bit more. Take this as far as you like. Something like that looks fine, and we might come back and adjust it, but let's put it onto our stalk to see how it's looking. So let's enable the stalk, and I'm going to drop this as a child. Don't need to, I'm just doing that for for organization's sake. In the plant layers, with the stalk selected, we're going to add a leaf, and with the leaf we only want this one on the top, so we turn off the count but leave leaf on end on. That gives us that single leaf on the end of the stalk, and this is what we're going to put the annulus into. So that's with the leaf selected, go to geometry, change it from basic to custom, and we can drop in our flower object. That puts it here. Now we need to do a couple of things now to get it so that it's orientated correctly. Go to orientation, and we can change the up vector to minus y world, and then with the y rotation set that to minus 100, and you can see that now puts it into a place where we can start manipulating it. So we'll go back to the main, and we'll drop that position, something like that, increase the scale, just adjust this to where you want it to really, And because it's fully procedural, we can go back to our object and we can manipulate it. So we want a bit more length on there. And if you want more detail in the modifiers, you can adjust that as well. It's all completely procedural, so nothing's going to be broken if you start tweaking things. It's really, really good. Okay, I'm happy with that. That's giving us our basic parts. And then the last thing we want to do is our cap. And again, we're going to use a flower object for this. So we'll go, let's turn these both off. Taiao menu, another flower. And for this one, we're going to use the pistil because it's already pretty much in the right shape. So let's start naming these actually. We're going to put this one to annulus. And this one we'll put under there, and we'll call this cap. Right, so with the flower selected, we want to delete everything bar the pistil. And again, we'll get our wireframe up, NB, so we can see the geometry. Let's just lift this up because we want to see underneath. Right, pistil selected. We've already got a cap style shape. Let's make it wider. Increase that width, and we can adjust this scale later as well, but let's get something working. And then we're going to start increasing the subdivisions. So let's go for 4 for now, and we might adjust that later. But what you'll note is underneath there's no subdivisions, and that's because if you look at the profile spline, the end is flat and we want to give it some geometry under here. So let's move this across, and then we're going to add, by holding control, another point here, and that gives us the ability to add in our geometry. As you can see, we've now got some nice geometry here, but we need a bit more than that. So just play around with the spline until you can get enough segments in here. I don't want that one. Something like that. And now we might need to increase the geometry some more. There's a lot on the top, but we need it on the bottom because this is where we're going to add the gills. So that's fine. Let's get rid of that wireframe display, and we'll increase the height. Okay, so there's these ridges here. We've got too much geometry going on, so let's go with that. Okay, that looks good. And obviously play around with the shape as much as you want to get this kind of curves, whatever you need, that's fine. Something like that, maybe a bit more height. And then what we want to do is we want to get these gills in there. So we're going to go to the modifiers, and we're going to add a displacer again. With the displacer, again we're going to use that noise and do the same kind of trick. Go to there, increase that, or one of the ones you need to pick the right angle. Need a bit more geometry in there. So go back here. I'm going to put it up to 5. Okay, so now you can see we're getting these gills. That's starting to look good. Don't worry about the top, we're going to fix that. Let's go back to our modifiers. Just adjust that. Let's put it to 10. Nice round number, and that's going to be our gills, and you can adjust the contrast as well if you want a bit more, but we'll leave it as it is. And now what we want to do is mask out the top. So we'll go back up, and with the shader we're going to enable a layer shader. Go in here, and we need a gradient, and we'll put this gradient below. Turn off the noise for now, and with the gradient we're going to set that to Y. I know we need it on V. Fine. And then we'll set this to a layer mask. And it needs to be inverted here. So invert that. And you can see now we can adjust where our noise is along the top of this. So we get the gills just where we want them. I'm going to have them fold over the top a little bit, like so. Okay, so that's looking pretty cool. The cap. Okay, so let's enable the rest of the mushroom here. Go to the plant, and this time we're going to add a custom object. And the custom object creates this existing cap, and you could have used that as well because it gives you the same sort of options, but I quite like to use the flower just because it gives you a few more things than the custom object does. So all we need to do now is drop that in there, and we've got our cap, so we can adjust the size and the position. So just drop it down so they starts blending in together like so. Let's put on some subsurface just so we can see it's not doing anything, but once we get to the rendering stage we'll be able to see a bit more. Okay, so that's pretty much the basics of getting the mushroom built, and then next thing we're going to do is looking at setting up some basic materials. Okay, so here we are inside of Redshift, and we've got the render view playing, but there's no lights in the scene, and I've also turned it off on the globals. So what we're going to do is go to the render menu, and we'll drop in a Redshift sky rig, just so we've got some lights in the scene, and we can adjust the lighting, just get some shadows and something like that. And we'll also put an HDRI in there, but let's first get something to bounce the light back up so we can see what's above, something like that, just so that we can bounce the light and see what's happening at the top of the mushroom. So you can see those gills. Cool. Okay, let's drop a quick HDRI in there as well. So we'll do a Redshift dome light, go to the HDRIs, and let's just put that in there. So we'll go to the dome light, attributes, drop something in there just so there's a little bit extra to look at. Okay, that's made it a bit dark on the viewport, but that's fine. Right, let's look at some materials. We'll work on the cap first, so let's go in here and we'll add a new material. Let's turn off our assets. So click new material and we'll drop that on the cap, and then we just need to start looking at the colors. So the first thing we want is a ramp that's going to give us our reds going into the white gills. So let's add a color ramp. So, and we'll pipe that into the color, but we'll solo it so that we can work solely on this ramp. Okay, let's go up here. We've got our ramp, and we can start playing with the colors. So let's bring this up so we can see where it is right there. That's cool. Now this one is going to be a sort of off-white, dirty kind of color. I think like that, a bit darker. That's cool. Then we're going to bring this one down so that we get it. What we want is the edge here. The edge of these things has got kind of an orangey texture. So let's add a knot there. With this one, we will look at getting this orange texture color like that, and we'll bring a white the other side. Right, now we can adjust where it is. So let's bring it right down to the edge. Cool, that's where we want it. We'll make it a little bit bigger. So something like that looks good. Make it a little bit more yellowy off color. We can adjust all this later. It's not a big drama to have just some basics in there to start with. And this one's going to be our red. Let's pick a nice red, and it's a good idea to sample these from an actual photo, but we're building a basic material here. Something like that looks good. Now let's put a little bit of noise in there. So we go to the adjust. We've got some noise options down here, just a touch, just to break it up so it's not perfect. Something like that looks good. Okay, so we'll unsolo that. And what we want to do first is we want to have some subsurface in the bottom. We don't want it on the top because these things are quite opaque from the top, but on the bottom they start getting a bit of subsurface. And if we add it straight to everything, then we'll get it all being subsurface, and that's not natural. So let's close these down and we'll go to the subsurface. We want to access the color and we want to access the weight. So we'll pipe the color that we've just made with this ramp into the subsurface color, and then with the weight we're going to use another ramp. So let's double click, add a ramp. And this ramp, let's solo it again, is going to give us a mask. So let's invert this so that the top is black, like so, and the bottom is white, which is where we want the subsurface to be. Something like that looks good. So let's unsolo that, pipe that into the weight, and then we can add some subsurface. A bit of color. Let's just get a sort of slightly off-white color into there, and that's looking all right. Okay, so we'll keep it like that, and then with the reflections we'll just add a bit of noise to it. So let's double click and add a max on noise, and we'll solo that. Okay, so that's the noise. Let's get something like a wavy turbulence, and we will adjust the scale like that, and then we can pipe that into the roughness of the reflections. That just breaks it up so it's not all perfect on the top. Cool. Okay, next thing we need to do is we need our little white scales. So we're going to create some new materials here, and I'll put that there. We'll get another RS standard material. This is going to be our white. So let's get the base and make that white. Then we're going to mix that with a material blender, but we need a mask. So let's create our mask. So we go and we'll add another max on noise. And let's solo that. So this one we're going to use dense because they lead themselves quite nicely to little spots. Let's make them a bit bigger. And then we'll adjust the contrast so that we break down loads of them, and we don't want so many, so we can just adjust the brightness and contrast till we get a nice amount. So let's make them a bit bigger. Something like that. That looks good for our dots, but we don't want it underneath, so we need to create a little setup. So we're going to get another ramp, and let's adjust this ramp. So we'll solo that, and sometimes these don't show up and you need to do a bit of refreshing. There we go. For some reason, let's get this ramp and then we'll adjust it. So again, we want to invert it so that the black's on the top. Bring that down, bring that white up. Cool, that's good. And then we will need to mix these together. We're going to use color layer. So color, and we want color layer. I'm going to pipe the top one into the base color, and let's solo this. And again, we might need to refresh it because sometimes it decides to not work. It may not work straight away, but we'll keep going. And then this one's going to go into the second layer. If that's selected, we're going to set this to multiply. And let's refresh again. Okay, so we need to invert our ramp. It's around the wrong way for this. Let's bring this down. There we go. So now we've got our little mask set up with the scales on the top, nothing going into the gills. That's perfect. Right, let's mix this in. So we're going to put this down here, move it back a bit. We need a material blender, so double click, material blender, and we'll put that one in the top. So we're going to pipe that in there, that in there. So then we're going to put this guy as the second layer one. So we've got our base, which is our color that we set up, going into the base, and then we've got our new white going into here, and then we've got a blend color, and that's where we pipe this one. Okay, so let's unsolo that. And there you go, you've got our scales on the top. That's looking cool. And we can use this as a bump as well, so let's create a bump node. Pipe our output into there, and we'll pipe this into both of the bump channels of these two, and you can adjust it if it gets too much sort of noisy color shadows. Just adjust the scale. So that's looking cool. So we've got our scales, we've got our cap color, we've got our nice white gills with a bit of dirt in there, and you could also use like a curvature shader to get even more detail into here if you like. I'll leave that up to you. And then the last thing we want to do is just put a bit of a gradient onto both of these, the stalk and the annulus. So let's call this cap. Add another material, and we'll add a ramp. And this one is going to go on, we might use it on both. We'll put it on the plant for the stalk at the moment. Let's reset that so we don't want it overriding this material. And let's solo it. Okay, so you can see the direction is wrong for what we need, but that's alright, we can fix that. We'll just adjust the colors. So we've got the white on the back, so we'll just invert that. And we've got the black on the bottom. Okay, so the black, we'll just use that kind of greeny, muddy, coming out of the soil sort of color. So down here, something like that. That's good. And then the top's just slightly off-white. So into those yellows, just a slight off-white, so it's not perfect. But that's good, and I'm going to put a bit of that into the subsurface channel as well. So color, subsurface, put a bit of subsurface in here. Let's turn this off. You can adjust that as you need. Okay, that's cool. Let's turn this sky rig off. Okay, I'm just going to increase the strength of this so we get a bit more light. Cool. Right, now it's nice to also add a little bit of bump into these just to break it up a bit, so we'll get another max on noise. And let's solo that so we can see it. Quite like Cranial for this sort of thing, because it's sort of a quite nice organic looking material noise. Let's increase the strength. Yeah, sorry, the scale. Let's say 2.5, and we'll just pipe that into a bump map. So turn the solo off, double click, add bump. And then just pipe that into the bump, just to break it up, add a little bit more noise. And that color on the top of the ramp, it seems a bit dark, so let's just adjust that more to the whites. Okay, so there we go. There's a technique for making procedural mushrooms using INSYDIUM Taiao.